What is going on, people? Welcome to Dynasty 365. Sorry, we're a little late. Had some technical difficulties. It was totally awesome when you put out a tweet, an hour and a half before the show. And you're just like, all this amazing action starts at 8 p.m., 8 p.m., 8 p.m. And it's like, dude, it's like 8:11. So our bad. But technology can be a what. Welcome to Dynasty 365. Like I just said, I'm your host, Jorge Edwards. Got Justin Taylor with me. You can find us both on the X Machine over at Jorge B. Edwards and at JT Orange. JT is also the host of The Stew with JT Brew, which we'll be getting a couple episodes coming up pretty soon, right, JT? Is that accurate?
Yeah, I've been behind. Things have been crazy. Like I said, my girlfriend and her kids moved in. It's been a mess, man. It's been great, but we've got so much stuff. I've collected so many things in the last 45 years of my life. It's insanity. So me having to go through and clean out stuff from like 20 years ago to make room for them has been a lot more of a process than I thought it would be. So it's mostly my fault, but it's been a crazy process. So I've been a little behind trying to get the schedule together, but I am going to come out, break down every division, what we can expect on the season, look at betting odds, who we're taking, over, unders, wins, look at division winners, what are the odds on those things. We're taking that Super Bowl performance. My buddy John McGlynn's going to jump on with me to do that on the stew. We're going to break that down into 8 episodes. We were hoping to start a couple weeks ago, but like I said, ran into some other things, but we will have that knocked out here hopefully over the next couple weeks to get you kind of set up for the regular season for all those NFL betting heads out there.
Awesome. So again, something to look forward to there. And tonight's episode is going to be a very awesome episode because we're going to be doing some Dynasty player performance reviews, specifically looking at players that were drafted in 2021, 2022, 2023. We're going to be looking at some trends, and we're going to be seeing like, okay, all this culminated to last year in 2024. What's the verdict? Are they exceeding our expectations? Are they, are they going the opposite direction? Who knows? We do, kind of, we hope. So we're going to give you our thoughts and assessments on that. Before we do that, as we always do, JT, what's new with you?
Like I said, man, just been doing that. Moving drafts are plentiful right now.
Right.
The least favorite part of being a commissioner in a league, he's obviously dealing with infighting of something that happened, but setting up live drafts or even online drafts are having a night or a nightmare. I've got a free agent auction in one of my leagues, and it's been an absolute mess the last week trying to get that signed up. Everybody's getting older. Everybody's got kids. Everybody's got hobbies and other things going on. Man, trying to get 3 hours in one night slated for 12 guys is extremely difficult these days for some reason. So been really fighting that the last week, trying to get all these in. And the problem is some people are like, hey, why what's the hurry? And I'm like, the hurry is if we don't get some of this stuff done in June, we're going to get into vacations. I coach football. A couple other guys in our league coach football. All that starts in July. Then you get into August and you're basically in full on redraft mode. So you have all your redraft leagues. So I'm like, I hate to say that, like, we have to rush to get some of this dynasty stuff done, but we kind of have to rush to get some of this dynasty stuff done in June. So, so if you haven't been setting up your live drafts or your online drafts, slow drafts, obviously not as big of a worry. But man, it's getting filled up. Like everybody's like, oh, can't we do one of these Sundays the next couple of weeks? And I'm like, I have 3 straight live drafts over the next couple of weeks, including Scott Fishbowl in Cincinnati coming up. Nice. Super pumped for that one. But I'm like, guys, I have drafts all over the place. So I'm like, I'm squeezing them in as much as I can. So while it's a fun time of year, Jorge, it is a little bit stressful as well, trying to get all this, getting the schedule figured out.
Let's see here. We got a comment here from Brandon. Brandon, welcome. He says Christian Kirk is looking like a sleeper. What do you think about that? Christian Kirk going over to the Houston Texans. They drafted 2 wide receivers in the draft, Jalen Noel, and the second one is escaping my mind because my brain is farting right now. Jaden Higgins. Thank you very much. And a lot of the talk, a lot of the OTA talk we've been listening to and hearing is Noel's been looking pretty good, very good in these OTAs. So, Christian Kirk could be that sleeper guy, the guy who, well, I take that back. Brandon, I'm going to push back on that one. Is he a sleeper? I mean, this guy is a couple of seasons removed from being like a top 12 wide receiver in fantasy. You know, he had the injury. He dealt with a couple of years of injuries. You know, he's going to a better situation, I think. I think Stroud is better than Lawrence, and you can push back on that with me, JT, because I know you're a big T-Law guy, especially John McGlynn as well over at Dynasty Evaluation. So it is – I think it's a better situation. I think there's just more firepower to go on. That will go on in Houston. So I don't know if he's necessarily a sleeper, but I bet you his ADP is going to indicate that he's a sleeper. So I guess that's where he I could see that from that perspective. What are your thoughts, Jason?
Yeah, I agree. I actually think, for the value where, people are definitely sleeping on Christian Kirk with the injury last year, kind of out of people's minds. I think he could be really nice this year, especially for value where you can get him or what you can trade for him. I traded before last season a first and second in 2027 for him. So I was pumped about that trade. Win for me. I still think it's a win, even though I do like Christian Kirk. I've got him in a lot of leagues. It's going to be interesting how quickly the rookies, get up to speed. Noel and Higgins. I would definitely not count out Christian Kirk. I do like Noel and Higgins both a lot. Now, are those guys going to be able to immediately come in and produce? I like Christian Kirk's chances with him and Nico kind of being the guys early. I definitely think Higgins and Noel are going to cut out some space for themselves in that offense. But I think, Kirk and Nico early are going to be the guys. I think we're going to see a nice bounce back from CJ Stroud in this Texans offense. They just really kind of struggled last year, couldn't get it together, ton of injuries. The O-line was bad. I think they're going to bounce back a little bit. I'm a big Stroud guy. I love T-Law, big T-Law fan. I actually like Stroud better. I'm with you on that, Jorge. Stroud was my QB1 the class. When he was drafted, I loved him over everybody else. He was by far the guy I wanted to see the Colts get. Very disappointed he went to Houston instead, but I really like him. So I do like Christian Kirk. I do think has got nice sleeper potential this year. And Jamie, I've been meaning to send you a message, bud. What's up, bud? I got the Hunter jerseys. My son was freaking ecstatic. He's so pumped. It fits him well. He is fired up about it. I'll send you a pic on X so you have it, man. I'll post that one. We got him in the mail the other day. Jamie, super nice, man. Got us some Travis Hunter jerseys, my son's favorite player. My niece goes to Colorado. We went and got to go see Travis Hunter play this year at Colorado. He was fired up about it, and Jamie was nice enough to get us a black and got me an old school throwback Jags jersey with the Jag on the sleeve, the teal one. Love it. It's phenomenal. Got me a Travis Hunter one of those. I hope the Jags break that jersey out this year. But Jamie, super appreciate it, man. I owe you.
Jamie just comes through in the clutch with everybody. It's amazing. Thank you very much, Jamie. And Brandon says, Noel, is that you're right? Absolutely. I misspoke there. It was the Higgins, the Stroud on the boundary reception that really on Twitter caught a lot of fire. So apologize for that. And folks, again, wherever you're tuning in, please, subscribe to Fantasy and Frames. If you're interested in listening to us in podcast form, this will be released tomorrow morning. Wherever you listen to podcasts, just subscribe to the Dynasty 365 podcast. If you're watching us on X, follow Fantasy and Frames. If you're watching us on Facebook, follow Fantasy and Frames. If you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe to Fantasy and Frames. I'm picking up the theme here, people. And of course, we're also streaming right now on X, over on my and JT's channel as well. So, give us a follow too. We'd really appreciate it. But let's get into it. Let's get into talking about some skilled players that, who were drafted in between 2021 and 2023. And let's compare them to 2024 and just seeing where is their trajectory going. And, in getting, some of the research done, I really went down the well on a player. I was really researching this particular player, and I'm just like, ooh, this is interesting. This is interesting. It's like that scene from Wayne's World where Wayne is going over the contract, where it's like, I like this. Okay, this is good. I like what you did here. And so I'm doing that with this player, and then all of a sudden I realize, Jorge, you're an idiot. He was drafted in 2020. So he's just outside, and I'm pissed because
you're the one that said it too. That you said the 2021.
Yeah, I know.
That kills. You could have just adjusted it. I wouldn't have said anything.
No, but I want to be transparent so people think I did some research here. It really got me. But what? Let's just start off with the mulligan, and then we'll get into the ones that actually obey the rules. And let's talk about fantasy performance, and we'll kind of tie that back into dynasty value. He was drafted in 2020 by the Indianapolis Colts. In 2021, he was the wide receiver. And of course, my note is right there. I believe 22 in PPR with 14 points per game on 129 targets. He had 12 games with double-digit touchdowns. In 2022, he was a wide receiver 23 with 13.5 points per game. Increased in targets, 141 with 11 games in double-digit touchdowns or double-digit fantasy points, excuse me. 2023, wide receiver 15. So we're going up and up and up in fantasy point production in PPR with 15 points per game on, again, going up in production with, or at least going up in preference by the quarterback in targets with 156 and 13 fantasy points per game. 15 fantasy points per game and 13 games with double-digit fantasy points. And then he came down a little bit this past year. He finished as the wide receiver 26 in PPR, 14 points per game, came down in targets, 111 targets, and he only had 6 games with double-digit fantasy points. So we saw this great upward trend, and then all of a sudden, kind of took a little bit of a dip, and people are now starting to like fade him a little bit. And doing this research, I'm like, should people be fading Michael Pittman? Because Michael Pittman, he has shown the elite production from a fantasy standpoint. He just had a really bad situation this past year. I mean, it had to be horrendously bad for this to happen, because even though, you look at the quarterbacks that he's been dealing with, the backup quarterbacks he's had to deal with, the changing quarterbacks, the past few seasons, he still was productive. He still was getting hyper targeted. And then last year, I mean, Anthony Richardson, is he the quarterback? Is he not the quarterback? You bring in all these, people, you swap in the quarterback position, and it's not like that hasn't happened before with Michael Pittman, but he obviously took a dip in production there. And you're the resident Colts fan here. I mean, you go to every single game there, JT. Are people being a little bit too low on Michael Pittman? And does that make him a huge buy for you in your dynasty leagues?
He's a buy for me because people have really jumped ship on almost everyone on the Colts that isn't Jonathan Taylor. People are just worried about the pass game. People are really, really worried about AR. Can he ever get it together? Even if Daniel Jones starts, people aren't super pumped about Daniel Jones. Pittman was like a really nice, when he was a rookie, really nice value. You could get him for second round in most leagues. I got a couple leagues. He slipped to the third. You felt like you stole him at that point. Had some nice seasons. The thing is with Pittman, he's just not fancy. He's not a sexy play. He doesn't make huge plays, doesn't make guys miss and then takes it to the house. He's just a guy that's solid all around. And as long as he gets targets, I think he's gonna be solid. Now, last year he was playing hurt. We found out he played about the second half of the season with a broken bone in his back. Obviously, that's real rough for a wide receiver. So I think you have to look at that a little bit. I think some of the hate on him too is people are worried about Josh Downs. I love Josh Downs. I think Josh Downs is a buy big time, but I think people are worried that he's going to start losing some of those target share to Downs. And now you add Tyler Warren into the mix. I think people are real nervous about like, what does that leave left for Pittman? I don't know if we can see much more advantage as far as him going up in fantasy production. I think he's kind of at his ceiling, but I do think for the value, what you can get him for now in Dynasty is decent enough to make him worth a buy.
No, that makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, I always like to quote Bill Parcells whenever it's like a young player who hasn't really done anything or has done very little in the league. Let's hold on with the anointing oil on Tyler Warren. Like, I get it. He was a great prospect. He's going to be on paper, a very competitive, for lack of a better term, tight end. He's going to get an opportunity in Indianapolis. I would be very hard pressed to see that the Colts kind of shun Michael Pittman for the sake of Tyler Warren, just because you have the upside there with Pittman. But you're right. He is coming off of that back injury. Obviously, having a bad back kind of gets in the way of life, let alone playing professional football. So definitely agree with those points there.
I agree with you on the Warren point. I don't think Warren is going to steal a lot. Personally, I just think him getting drafted so high, and the Colts just desperately needed a tight end. Their tight end play was terrible last year. I just think for dynasty purposes, people are nervous that that's just another mouth to feed. But I do think Pittman's going to be solid. Now, are you going to get 100 catches, 1,000 yards, and 8 touchdowns out of him again? I don't know. But I think he should be in that 80 to 90 catch range, pushing 900 to 1,000 yards, and hopefully, 5-6 touchdowns. For the price you're paying for him, I think that's solid fantasy production. You're hoping out of him you get wide receiver 2, maybe high-end wide receiver 3 production for fantasy purposes.
All right. So JT, you want to take a running back? You want me to keep going down my list here?
Let's jump. We'll go back and forth. I like that. Let's go. Let's go running back. Which one do you want? You want one of my downers or one of my guys that is overperformed?
You know what? Let's keep the positivity going.
Okay.
If you want to call the Michael Pittman discussion positivity, because technically I was breaking the rules on that one, but that's neither here nor there. Let's keep it positive. Let's start off on a good note.
Okay, so one of the guys I think that has absolutely outperformed where he was drafted and kind of expectations, especially from the fantasy community, a guy I loved in college, but didn't really get the draft capital, and people were a little nervous about him because it seemed like every year they were trying to get someone else to be the number one, and that's Chuba Hubbard. Chuba Hubbard has been a guy, 2,000-yard back at Oklahoma State in college. People were really high on him in the Devy community early on. Just one of those guys kind of fell in the draft. Fantasy purposes, people were getting him, but nobody was drafting him early. The question was whether he was ever going to be like a full-time starter in the NFL. And he's a guy who's been, extremely, extremely solid. If you look at him, where he's gone, rush grades, especially for PFF, and to give some of these things, for the last 3 or 4 years, he's way exceeded expectations. Really coming through with a big year last year. But if you look at what he's done compared to where he was going, I mean, even in 2022, rush grade, he was number 7, just behind Travis Etienne. Go back to 2023, look at where he was there as well. Another solid season for him, number 8 in rush grade. And and then you go look at last year in 2024 and see what he did there. I mean, a really nice breakout year for him there, as he was number 5 in overall rush grade. So if you were somebody that jumped on Chuba, and then especially if you had Chuba and you sold him, you were selling him for a really nice return on what you probably originally invested in, which was either a late round rookie draft pick or you picked him up off the free agent wire. And I saw him last year going, depending on the league, going for first and second round picks last year for teams that were trying to win it. He's just a guy on a bad Panthers team that has actually really been solid for fantasy purposes. I've got him on a couple teams the last few years, and I was hoping to get anything out of, and I was blown away with the actual fantasy production I was able to get.
No, and we've had the discussion whether or not we've had the discussion. The crew on Fourth and Frames for Redraft has had the discussion, like, where does Chuba fall in people's rankings? They brought in Rico Dowdle. I'm of the belief that doesn't really mean a lot. He's not on Dallas anymore, so it's not a situation. They gave, Chuba Hubbard some extra money. He started playing well towards the end of the last season. They immediately rewarded him. I think that speaks more volumes than bringing in a backup running back to be a backup running back. But that is, no, I like that. I like that a lot. Let's get to my next wide receiver here. And this one hurts because when I started the Fantasy and Frame, I forget who started the Fantasy and Frames Dynasty League. He was one of my first picks. And, he in 2022, he was a first round selection, number 11 overall. To give you some backtracking of information, he was PFF's number 6 graded wide receiver overall in 2022 in 15 games. He was a wide receiver 2 in yards per run, wide receiver 18 in yards after the catch per reception, wide receiver 4 in average depth of target, wide receiver 27 in PPR with 13.2 points per game, on 119 targets with Andy Dalton as his quarterback. I'm talking about Chris Olave. You now go to 2023. He dropped from being the number 6 wide receiver to the number 8. Okay, what to do? 16 games, wide receiver 8 in yards per hour run, wide receiver 22 in yards after the catch per reception, wide receiver 9 in average depth of target. So you're seeing some minimal drop off here. But wide receiver 20 in PPR with 14.5 points per game on 138 targets. I like that. I like the fantasy numbers going up. I like the target numbers going up. And that's with Derek Carr. And then you get back to 2024. He was actually PFF's wide receiver 7 this past season. Wide receiver 56, however, in points per game with 9.6. And he, of course, was dealing with the Carr Rattler situation there. And so when I want to go back to the wide receiver 7 PFF overall ranking there. That's a small sample size. That's like 8 games. Like he did really well to warrant, from an efficiency side, warrant PFF stating, okay, well, based off of like all your metrics here, we're going to grade you as a wide receiver 8. But something tells me if you extrapolated that out to a full season, I don't know if he necessarily finishes as the wide receiver 7 overall per PFF, just because of just how poor the quarterback play was last year for the New Orleans Saints. With the Carr injury, with Rattler coming in there, just a lot of things we guess we'll never know. And so the question here is, what do we do with Chris Olave? Do we consider him to be somebody who is falling in value, as somebody whose trend has been increasing from one perspective, like efficiency going down a little bit, but that's going to happen the more opportunities you have. The more opportunities, more attempts, more targets, so on and so forth. Efficiency is going to drop, right? Because you're getting more volume, and that's going to kind of lessen that out. But the fantasy production has been getting there based on the target volume and the fantasy points per game. So what are your thoughts on Chris Olave? Has he been exceeding expectations? Has he been, falling short of expectations? And let's not forget the injury history with him.
Yeah, I think, he's one of those guys, again, a little bit like Pittman, who you just brought up. Whenever the quarterback situation is iffy, it just seems to affect guys' dynasty value because people are just nervous about the QB play. Now, Olave, we've learned even with bad QB play, guys can be good fantasy players because at some point teams have to throw the football. They've got to throw it, even if they don't throw it efficiently, and even if this target share, like as long as he's getting a decent target share, those guys can still be productive for fantasy purposes. So I don't care if it's Rattler, Shuck, whoever ends up starting for the Saints. If Chris Olave is healthy, he's going to see a lot of targets. I like him. I think he's a buy in fantasy right now. Has he exceeded expectations or gone a little under? I think you look at that, and I think initially, I think he exceeded expectations early on. I think even though he was a super high draft pick in the NFL, people were a little like, how really good is he? I think people were surprised they saw him come out with not great QB play and still put out a really nice rookie year early on. But now the injuries have piled up. The offensive situation has gotten worse around him. I like Olave. To me, he's a buy right now. I think he's underperformed. The injuries, to me, is what has made him underperform to this point of where we maybe thought he would be in his career. But he's one of those guys, and I got a guy on my list that I think is one of the high guys I'm high on. He's also had some injury problems, so you got to look at that too. Is he, even if they've had injuries, is he performing when he's on the field? I think Chris Olave is one of those guys. Sometimes you got to look past some of those injuries and be like, hey, what does he do when he actually plays? Well, he's been really efficient, really good when he's playing. I like Olave. If you got somebody who's over him, tired of him, wants to move on, he's a guy I would love to snag in dynasty leagues.
For a lot, or for like would you?
I wouldn't
overspend for him.
I wouldn't way overpay for him, but if somebody's like completely out on him and will take like a second, I'd buy him for a second immediately. Now, if you're talking about high to mid first, questionable whether I'm paying that. It really would matter on my team what I needed. If I felt like I was a target, monster, one guy away from really helping me, and he was like maybe coming in to be one of my top end flex plays. I didn't necessarily need him at wideout, but I could play Chris Olave over somebody else every week on a win now team. Maybe I overpay because I think, hey, that's going to be probably a late first there, and I could get more production out of him than I likely can out of maybe, say, a Luther Burden or a Mecca Buka this season. Maybe I make that move in that case. But yeah, it would for me, it'd be team dependent. But if I could get him in a mix, see, he's one of those guys, and I'll wrap this up. I know I get going long. He's one of those guys I feel like if you're going to do a multiplayer trade, he's one of the guys I like to get in that mix because I feel like he's a little undervalued. But if you throw in another solid piece in the trade with multiple players, then maybe you can get him for a little bit cheaper than you would just straight up.
Nice. Love it. Love it. Love it. Folks, what do you all think of so far? We've talked about Pittman. We're talking about Chris Olave. What do you think about these wide receivers here in terms of their dynasty value? What do you think? What are your thoughts on, just their production overall during the time of the NFL? JT, let's get to another running back for you.
I'm going to stick with the Oklahoma State Red. I know that's a shocker for people. I'm not a Cowboys fan. They do have some awesome uniforms. But Jaylen Warren for the Pittsburgh Steelers, an undrafted free agent, a guy that was picked up as a backup. If you actually look at his metrics, they're really nice. He has been super, super efficient. He was so efficient in 2023 that people were talking about, should he push Najee out as the starter in 2024? That ended up not happening. Injuries slowed Warren a bit last season, knocked him down just a little bit. But if you look at his career stats, entered the NFL in 2022 as an undrafted free agent, ran for 379 yards on just 77 carries with a touchdown. Also had 28 catches for 214 yards. Solid start for undrafted free agent backup running back. Really broke out in 23. Only 149 carries, but piled up 784 yards and was one of the top yards per carry running backs in the league. Added 4 touchdowns. Also had 61 catches for 370 yards. Nice for him in a PPR format. Last year, like I said, the numbers dipped a little because of injury. Was down to 500 yards rushing and a touchdown, 38 catches for 310 yards. So almost had the same amount of yards, but quite a few less catches. If you look at his projections for this next season, depending on where he works it in with Caleb Johnson there, the new rookie out of Iowa, I think he's still probably in that 800. I think he could get over 800 yards rushing. I think he could be approaching 400 yards receiving, maybe 50, 60 catches again. Where you're getting Warren as a guy who was an undrafted free agent who basically went undrafted in rookie drafts because he was an undrafted free agent, I picked him up everywhere as a Steelers fan. I will say that's part of why I got him, but I went and picked him up everywhere on the free agent wire in all my leagues when he was a rookie. As a guy that basically you got for nothing and has been a career backup, he's actually been a fairly decent flex play for fantasy purposes most weeks. And you don't get to say that a lot, Jorge. There's not very often when you say, oh, this guy who's been a full-time backup his entire career, he's never been a starter, is actually playable on a week-to-week basis in fantasy. Jaylen Warren's one of those few guys that it is a guy that you can plug in, even though he is a backup. You can plug him in as a flex play, or if you're really injured, bye weeks, you're just sparse at running back. He's an okay RB2 for you on certain weeks. I think that increases this year if he stays healthy. Obviously, he was slowed down by the injury early part of the season last year. I think he cuts into Caleb Johnson's workload. I don't think Caleb Johnson 1-for-1 trades out what Najee has done the last 4 years for Pittsburgh. So I do think Jaylen Warren, if you can get him as a nice buy, he's not a guy you're going to count on. But for where he was and where you got him, man, he has been ultra productive, for the price that you paid for him.
I love it. It's, I agree with you. It is very shocking that somebody who's been a standalone flex or RB2 for his team has that standalone value. And it kind of makes sense because Pittsburgh, obviously known for being a very run-heavy team over their existence, so to speak. No, I love that call. Let's get to the next.
Jamie just said he got a fantastic trade. He said he sold Parker Washington for Jalen Warren before the NFL draft. That is a win, my friend. I love that move. I like Parker. He's okay. He's going to be, they get a lot of guys there in Jacksonville. I love that move for Jalen Warren. That's a great trade.
Very nice. All right, let's get to another wide receiver here. And this one won't take long, or maybe it will. We'll find out. He recently got an extension from the Baltimore Ravens for a good, decent chunk of money. He was a 2021 first-round selection, pick 27 overall. You look back to his 2024 season, so the most recent season, he, in 17 games, posted 756 yards on 72 targets. He was a wide receiver 50 in points per game with 10.3 fantasy points per game. Let's go back to 2023 now. Let's look at some of the rankings here. In 2023, he was the wide receiver 93 in points per game with 4.8 points per game. PFF's rated 49th best wide receiver. You go to 2022. Yes, he only played in 6 games, so he was injured. He was the wide receiver 59 though in points per game with 8.9 points per game. So he literally went almost in half between 22 and 23. PFF's wide receiver 36. So obviously 2022 he started off doing something pretty good. Obviously you're jumping from at least going backwards, I guess. He was doing really well. You go back to 2021, his rookie year. Out of all the qualified rookie wide receivers who were drafted that year, he was 8 out of 10 per PFF rankings overall. He had a 1.26 yards per route run and a 9.6 average at the target. He was the wide receiver 64 in points per game with 8.6 points per game, 12 games played with 515 yards. Why is Rashad Bateman still a thing? And Drew Scott, if you're watching, God bless you, man, because you are one of the most hardcore Rashad Bateman people out there. And I why? I don't understand the why. They drafted, Zay Flowers. They have, a two-headed monster at the tight end position with Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. You have, Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. Now, Lamar's passing volume has increased the past couple seasons, contrary to belief that he's just a scrambling quarterback. No, he's actually doing both at a very high level, being a passer and a runner. But again, you still have Derrick Henry for another year. So what is the allure of sticking with Rashad Bateman? Has he, and JT, let me ask you, is he transitioning because of this contract extension? And that's the thing, that's the wrinkle here that really gets me. With the contract extension, this is telling me that Baltimore sees a future with him, at least for the next few years. And what do we think about in Dynasty? We think about things from like a 2 to 3 year, or 3 to 5 year window. So with that being the case, with that being the case,
okay,
with the increase in passing volume of Lamar Jackson, is he shifting from being a dynasty asset to just more of a redraft asset, or is the contract extension making him back to being more of a dynasty asset?
I just talked about Rashad Bateman on another podcast this week. I'm not even gonna lie to you. He's like bring on the Bateman talk. I have him in a few leagues. He's definitely been an underperformer for where he was drafted. I actually like him as a player. It's just fantasy wise, he's not the guy. He's not the guy, especially in Dynasty. No, here's where I tell people, and I just said this the other day. Here's where I like Rashad Bateman. Best ball leagues and non-PPR leagues is where I like Rashad Bateman. Because where you're getting value from him is deep plays and touchdowns. That's where he comes and helps you out week to week. PPR leagues, he's just never. He's a 35 to 50 catch a year guy. Unless you're Deshaun Jackson catching 65 or 70 passes for 11 or 1,200 yards because you're Deshaun Jackson, 35 to 50 catches as the number 2 wideout on your team is pretty brutal. Let's just be honest. It's pretty brutal. Right now, Bateman, if you're just looking at him, high end for him is 50 catches for like 650 yards. The 9 touchdowns last year were amazing. Now, that's the one thing you can look at is at least he's on a good offense. So, like some of these guys we talk about, we're like, volume, because their offense is terrible. At least he's on a good offense that scores. So that's good for you. But to me, he's in PPR, half PPR. I like him a little more. Full PPR, I want nothing to do with Bateman. He's just never going to get you enough action. I mean, you're going to get guys that get 5 catches for 50 yards that are going to outscore him week to week. You know, it's just he's tough, but the touchdowns and standard scoring, I like him because of the touchdown upside as a flex play. I just don't think there's ever. I think Baltimore likes that he knows what he's doing. I think they see the talent of what he can do for that team, and I think he fits a nice profile for Baltimore. I just don't think there's anybody out there is like dying to go get Rashad Bateman on another team and being like, he could be a star for us. I don't think anyone thinks that. I think Bateman is what he is. I think he's okay for the Ravens. I think he's a solid player. I think he fits what they do. But to me, he's a best ball guy. He just is. And he's a standard guy. He's a nice play if you're in a standard league because of the touchdown upside. But PPR leagues, I'm out. I got him in one league and I play him every week because I'm like so shallow at wide receiver because I'm in a league where the guy before me I took on his team traded like every draft pick he had for like 3 or 4 years for Josh Allen. So I'm like just barely making it with like guys I can get my hands on. And Bateman wasn't terrible for me this year in that league, but he's not a guy you want to like weekly look at your lineup and go, oh, Rashad Bateman starting as my wide receiver too. I feel good about it. Like, no, you don't feel good about it. You're just praying. You're like, do something this week. Just catch a touchdown. Because if he catches a touchdown, you're like, okay, that does work. And he caught 9 last year. So we can't discount he caught 9 touchdowns. But that's where I'm at on Bateman. He's been a disappointment for where he was drafted and what the expectations were. But I kind of think at this point, we know who he is for dynasty purposes. And if you're rating him any higher than where he is, like, I don't know what to do. Obviously, Drew loves him. Drew, I wish I was in some leagues I could trade him to you. But I only have him in, I think, one league.
So while you were giving your analysis there, I sent a text message to Drew. And Drew, if you haven't checked your phone yet, I said, here's the login. Let me know when you need the code. Come on the show and give us, please, your Bateman talk. So he may be somewhat tempted to jump into the studio as we keep going here on Dynasty 365. But if you want to hear more of Drew's awesome analysis, look, Drew Scott, there's a lot of people here at Fantasy and Frames who do a lot of great things, but Drew Scott at Drew 3MR, probably one of the most quiet and humble, yet at the same time knows his stuff analysts out there, and just definitely somebody you should be giving a follow and interacting with on.
Also, I gotta like Drew. St. Louis Cardinals. Drew's a Cardinals fan
exactly
as I am. So I'll always got Drew's back for that reason.
Nice. All right, let's take us to your last running back here to talk about here on Dynasty 365.
My last plus, and this one is a little bit, like I told you, is a little bit of an iffy, and that is Kenny Walker. I know some people call him Kenneth Walker, Ken Walker. I like Kenny Walker. I don't know why. I don't know what he prefers. I like Kenny Walker better than anything else. So I always call him Kenny Walker. Ken Walker I don't like Ken Walker. I don't know why.
Yeah, Ken.
I don't like Ken. Ken doesn't feel like a football player. I mean, I think of Ken the Barbie. Ken Barbie don't like. I want Kenny G, Kenny, something. Kenny Walker, really? Kenny Dub, Kenny Dub. Well, not the real Kenny G, but I'm just saying, like, I want something that sounds like Kenny Dub, like Kenneth. I like Kenneth. I don't like Ken Walker. So sorry, that's my little diatribe on that. Kenny Walker, Seahawks, obviously a high draft pick. He was a guy I liked a lot coming out. There's obviously some, back and forth on whether he's actually performed to expectations or he's actually been below expectations. I'm right in the middle on that, Jorge, and I'll tell you why. When he's healthy, he is like one of the top backs in the league. His metrics are off the charts, If you look at his PFF grades, he's like top 3 to 5 every year he's been in the league. Injury problems, like we talked about a little bit with Olave. Injury concerns, he's missed a decent amount of games. For fantasy, that kills because you want guys that are going to be in your lineup every week. You don't want to have to guess if your RB1 or your RB2 is going to play week to week. That's been a little bit of an issue with Walker. So for that, I think he's been a slight disappointment because of that. But I think for dynasty purposes, because he's slightly been a disappointment because of injuries, he's another guy like Olave I want to go get because when he's on the field, he performs. He has performed. He has been fantastic when he actually plays. If you look at his offensive PFF grades, and I know PFF grades aren't everything, but if you look at his PFF grades, 2024, he only played in 11 games. He only played in 11 games, but he was number 3 overall PFF grade in 2024. So, again, super efficient. Well, where was he at in 2023? Also number 3 in 15 games. So, real nice there. And then you go all the way back even to 2022. Where is he at in 16 games? Number 3.
That's crazy.
This guy has been crazy good when he's in the lineup. And so for me, that's where if I'm out there buying Kenny Walker. It does not come without a little bit of angst and a little bit of worry if he's going to get playing time, not playing time, but if he's going to stay healthy. But I really like what he does. I think Seattle is going to lean heavier on the run this year with him, even if that doesn't mean a ton more carries for him. Maybe they work Charbonnet in a little bit more. Damian Martinez, their 7th round pick out of Miami. I love him as the 3rd running back. If anybody gets hurt, I love him coming in there. I just think Walker's a buy right now. I think he's slightly disappointed, but I think because of he's only disappointed because of injuries. When he's actually played, he's been everything you wanted him to be. So for that reason, he's a guy I want to go grab.
You know, if Aiden, which by the way, Aiden, wishing you the best right now. He's going to be out for at least tonight's programming. We miss you, but he is our resident Kenny Walker fan. So again, if anything positive, Kenny Walker, he is all about that. No, that makes a lot of sense. And you know, here's the thing that I find even more interesting in Seattle. Like Charbonnet, when he's been given the role, hasn't really done anything to like separate himself as like, ooh, I'm a threat. I'm going to take your job. You know, it's like more like, no. You just keep that seat warm until Kenny Walker gets back. And then, the rest
or
is
hey,
history.
my kind of like deep, like take on the Seattle backfield. I think Damian Martinez beats out Zach Charbonnet for the number 2 role eventually. I think he ends up becoming the guy. And then if Kenny Walker gets hurt again, I think Damian Martinez takes over and plays well. So it's a little bit of a long shot. Obviously needs injuries, needs some stuff to happen. But if you haven't done your dynasty rookie drafts yet, man, snag Damian Martinez late in your rookie drafts. I've been getting like late 4th or 5th round for him in leagues. If you're an IDP league, I got him in the 7th round of a draft the other day in an IDP league. I like him. He might end up being another burger. He really might, but I like the talent. He was one of my higher rated guys. I was shocked he fell to the 7th round of this draft. But I like him, and I think Seattle is going to try to protect Darnold, and I think they're going to try to run more. So I'm in there. Oh, JB just asked the most mind-blowing question for me. Damian Martinez or LaQuinn Allen. My 2 favorite late running backs. I literally, if I can get them, what I do is I draft one of them and then I trade somebody else that has a pick left. I trade back into the draft and I take the other one. I'm telling you right now, I love both these guys, Jamie. I know that it's a long shot. Either one of them see playing time this year, but I both like their futures. Martinez and Allen are a little bit rough for me. I think Martinez is better than Charbonnet, so I think he has a better shot to get behind Walker, but I think Kenny Walker holds that job no matter what. LaQuinn Allen for me, and a guy this is a great transition, Jorge, if we want to talk about one of my fallers. I think LaQuinn Allen on the Jags is probably the best receiving back on that team. I think he has a shot to be a legit 3rd down receiving option for them. Maybe not this season, but definitely by next year. I really like LaQuinn Allen. Both those guys I'm taking in the last round of my rookie drafts, or if I don't get them in the last round, they're the very first guys I'm picking up off waivers on that first waiver run. Great question, Jamie. Jamie knows me too well. I love both those guys.
All right, let me get into my last wide receiver to talk about here. Drafted in 2022 in the second round, 52nd overall. In 2022, he was PFF's graded wide receiver 13. He was wide receiver 52 in PPR points per game with 9.8. He was wide receiver 2, however, and averaged up the target, wide receiver 15 in yards per route run. Then all of a sudden we see an increase in production in 2023 where he finished as the wide receiver 38 in PPR with 12.3 points per game. PFF's overall graded wide receiver 12. He was wide receiver 5 in yards after the catch for reception, wide receiver 7 in yards per out run, wide receiver 11 having averaged up the target. And then he had a little bit of a setback, but not by much this past year. Well, I guess in one metric, he played 14 games. He was the wide receiver 16 in yards per out run, wide receiver 7 and averaged up the target, wide receiver 40 in points per game in PPR with 11.7. And now he's no longer a Pittsburgh Steeler. He's a Dallas Cowboy going to, what we think is going to continue to be a vaunted fantasy producing offense here, at least in the passing game with, CD being next to him and Dak as the quarterback. I'm talking about George Pickens. It's one of those things where we've seen, unfortunately, I forget who wrote an article on this a couple of years ago, so forgive me. There was all this talk of George Pickens is more than just the deep ball guy. He can actually run routes. He can do X, Y, and Z. But for whatever reason, I'm guessing poor quarterback play, in Pittsburgh. Shocking. Sorry, Steelers fans, but it's true.
Been brutal. It's been brutal since Big Ben.
It's been brutal since Big Ben. Yeah, exactly. That's basically he's been the yellow guy for lack of a better word. But now when he catches it, he turns it upfield. He does great. He is efficient when he gets the ball in his hands, and he plays to his primary strength, and that's what the Steelers were doing. They were playing to what they felt was his primary strength, which is the deep ball. Now he goes to Dallas, wide receiver 2 next to CeeDee Lamb. For me, it comes down to Schottenheimer as well as what they're going to do on that offense, because you look at Brian Schottenheimer's track record. Whether he was, and this is a throwback, whether he was the offensive coordinator for the New York Jets back when LaDainian Tomlinson was a Jet, when he had his time in Seattle, as the offensive coordinator, his teams were very efficient running the ball, and they were very running oriented in those offenses. And now you have a situation where he's coaching questionably the best wide receiver he's ever had in CeeDee Lamb. Questionably the best quarterback he's ever had with Dak Prescott. He has a stable, and that is the nicest way to phrase the running back situation here.
I love it.
In Dallas, he has some running backs that, they're people. They're good. They're good people. They do a lot of good things for the community.
Good people.
Yeah. And so the question now is going to be, is he going to stick to his roots and kind of just I don't care, Javonte Williams, I don't care. I'm going to hammer the ball with him. Miles Sanders, yeah, you're up. I'm going to give you the ball. I'm just going to force feed. Is Jaden Blue going to be the guy who takes over? Who knows? A lot of question marks there, especially for a position that he is known to feature a lot in his offenses and get good production out of them. But now, like I said, he has these wide receiver options, and now it makes me wonder, okay, is George Pickens still going to be the yellow guy in Dallas? Because CD they line him up everywhere, where it's in the slot, outside. They make him very versatile as a wide receiver. So technically, if George Pickens is like that, then you have something that is extremely crazy in a good way, because you have 2 efficient wide receivers who can, cut on the dime and take it upfield for whatever route you want to talk about. But I'm partially scared, though, that what we've seen in Pittsburgh is more or less what you're going to get out of George Pickens, which is making him kind of, to me, decrease in dynasty value, even though he's going to a better offense. Does that sound crazy there, JT?
I hear where you're coming from on that, and I think there's definitely legit concern there. I definitely think you have to look at that because of the history of Schottenheimer. If I'm the Cowboys, and again, I'm just some guy talking on a podcast, I'm going the old school Peyton Manning Colts way of running the offense, and I am coming out every game throwing the ball to set up the run. I want to come out. I want to use CD. I want to use Pickens. I want to use Ferguson. I want to move the ball with Dak. And because teams are now on their heels, I can turn around and I can use my running backs, Javonte Williams, Gene Blue, who's a big play threat, fast guy. He needs space. What's the best way to get Jane Blue space? Throw the football, get teams on their heels, get teams playing back. Now you can get them the ball with a full head of steam and teams not stacking the box against them. So if I'm Dallas, that's the route I want to go. You're paying Dak all that money. You got CD. I actually, and again, I feel like I've said this a million times already, but I'm going to keep saying it. As a Steelers fan, hated to see Pickens get moved. I knew they probably weren't going to sign him to an extension. For fantasy purposes, I have George Pickens everywhere because he was a Steeler. I have him everywhere, and I like him a ton. I actually think this is a better fantasy opportunity for him. He might be better as the number 2 in Dallas than as the number 1 in Pittsburgh because I just think Dak's going to throw the ball a ton. I think they're going to be in a lot of shootouts. I think they're going to be in a lot of tough games. The Steelers are not going to want to throw the ball a ton, even with the Aaron Rodgers signing. I think they're going to want him to be efficient. I don't think they're going to want to just go out and all of a sudden start airing it out. I don't care. I don't think they're going to do that. So I actually like George Pickens. When everybody was hating on George Pickens, every separation metric came out a couple years ago, and they're like, "He can't separate. He can't do this. Can't do that." I was like, "Dude, I don't care if he can separate. He's got a phenomenal hands. The guy catches everything. So if he can't separate, that's fine as long as he can catch the ball with a guy all over him, which." He's proven he's awesome at. He can catch the ball with a guy all over him. I actually like George Pickens for this year. Whether he's under or overperformed, I think is very questionable. I think he's very here because in some circumstances, I think he's actually been better than people thought he would be. But in other circumstances, I think, has he lived up to being a wide receiver 1? No. Not really, but I think a lot of people didn't think he would even be a wide receiver 2. So to me, I think that's nice. I think he actually has a really good year in Dallas this year. For fantasy wise, I think it's a very nice landing spot. I think he actually works better as a wide receiver 2 on a team over a wide receiver 1. I still think he can get the same or better stats than he had at Pittsburgh as the wide receiver 1, if that makes sense. Even being the number 2 behind CD, because I think CD takes so much attention, it's going to help Pickens actually play better if he can keep the mental aspect together, as long as he cannot get mad that CD's getting 150 targets and he's not.
Love it, love it, love it. All right, JT, take us to your last player for tonight.
Yep. So my last guy has been, I think been below expectations, and I usually hate to say this, but just if you look year over year and where, if you're reading the Dynasty tea leaves of where he's going in his career, it's not looking great. And that's Travis Etienne out of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Former first round pick. Everybody wants to talk about Najee Harris and say he's been disappointing for the Steelers. But when you match him to Etienne, who went 1 pick after him, Najee's actually been much better in his career. So Travis Etienne, 2022, RB6 for PFF offense, but was one of the top RBs for fantasy purposes. Dropped to 12th in 23, dropped to 23 last year in 2024. He is just going in the wrong direction in every sense. Fantasy points, his production. If you look at his rush grades on PFF, everything's gotten worse year over year from early on. Now, luckily for him, Jacksonville signed with that 5th-year extension, gave him that money this year to be. But man, where there's smoke, there's fire. I just don't think there's any way they signed him to a long-term deal, especially after they drafted Brayshawn Tootin this year, plus my guy LaQuinn Allen are both in the mix. I think there's a chance Etienne and Bigsby are both gone in the next year or 2. I could see them moving on from those guys. Where he goes might be a better situation, might be a worse situation. for me, I'm very nervous fantasy wise. I started moving him in leagues last year, just because he had such a good 2022 that people were all over him. So if I could get any kind of value, I was trading him a lot, like him for like 2 or 3 players. Like I made a deal where I was trading him for Najee Harris, Christian Kirk, and like a 3rd rounder. Like, and I was making that move anywhere I had ETN. Not that I dislike him as a player. I just every metric, everything you look at shows him just declining year over year over year. I'm very nervous about him long-term dynasty prospects.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. So, folks, those are our thoughts there on some players in recent memory from 2021 to 2023, and then looking at their performance in 2024. And, I think some of them exceeded our expectations. Some of them kind of disappointed in certain respects. And, of course, there's the one outlier with Michael Pittman that I didn't pay attention to my own rules, but that's neither here nor there. Still, it was a good conversation topic.
We'll let it slide.
We'll let it slide this week. Thank you very much, JT. As you all know or don't know, this is Fantasy and Frames Wednesday. We got 3 shows back to back to back, hours long. We just finished up right now. We're finishing up right now Dynasty 365. The next hour, JT and I welcome Mike Woolert from the IDP show to talk about basically the same thing, except for IDP players from 21 to 23 and seeing how they've overachieved or underachieved. And then we got Fourth and Frames with the host Drew Scott next with myself and Kyle. We go over our top 12 wide receiver redraft rankings, and that's at 10 p.m. Eastern. And, of course, if you can't stay up late, early workday tomorrow or whatever it is, that's okay. All these episodes will be in podcast form wherever you listen to podcasts bright and early tomorrow morning. Before we get out of here, JT, anything you want to tell the masses?
That's it. Just appreciate everybody watching. I'll mention it on Shoot the Gap next, but IDP rankings are updated on DLF site. It's been a long go, but I've got them updated, still working on them. So check those out. Also, if you're into Devi, I got my top 75 Devi rankings updated as well. I've been doing a ton of CFF drafts of late. So if you're into that, got any questions about that, hit me up on all that stuff. And hey, stick around for Shoot the Gap. We're going to talk IDP.
And my DL, LB, and DB rankings, I just finally, for redraft this season, posted on fantasyandframes.com. So make sure you head over there and check those out. All right. So for JT, Jorge, we will now hit some buttons and play some music and see you later.